Hello, my name is Jonathan Salinas. I'm in 11th grade and I go to Clear Creek High School. I'm enrolled in History 1301 and English 1301 through College of the Mainland. Some things that I like to do involve marching band, spending time with my family, and traveling to see my grandparents in Mexico. I will now be talking about the triangular trade. The triangular trade was an economical exchange also known as the transatlantic slave trade. It happened roughly during the 16th to the 19th century. It is sometimes confused with the Columbian exchange, but the Columbian exchange was a biological exchange where animals, foods, and diseases were traded between Africa, Europe, and the United States. The triangular trade was between the United States, Europe, and Africa. During the triangular trade, there were different categories of things that were traded, such as technologies, religions, and supplies. Technologies were only traded from Europe, such as guns and ships, such as the caravel, the floit, and the galleon. Religions were traded from all regions. From North America, Catholicism and Protestant religion were traded. From Latin America and the Caribbean, Catholicism, Christianity blended with American and African religions were traded. From Africa, animistic native African religion was traded, and from Europe, Catholicism and Protestant religion was traded. Supplies that were traded out of the different regions were from Africa, slaves, ivory, and exotic hardwoods. From Latin America and the Caribbean, molasses, rum, sugar, coffee, cocoa, silver, gold, and diamonds were traded. From America, raw materials such as furs, timber, tobacco, indigo, and cotton were shipped out of America to Europe to become finished products. From Europe, with the raw materials from America, finished products such as textiles, jewelry, and furniture were made and shipped back to the Americas and to Africa. More about the slave part of the triangular trade. Approximately 10 to 12 million slaves were forcibly moved to the Americas on a journey called the Middle Passage. The journey was 5,000 miles long and lasted a few weeks to several months. The slaves were packed very tightly together. The ceilings were low, which prohibited them from sitting upright, and the oxygen levels were very low, which didn't even allow for candles to burn. Roughly 15% of the slaves died on the journey. 48% went to the Caribbean, 41% went to Brazil, and 5% went to America. Europeans started using slaves well before the Atlantic slave trade happened. The first real European slave trade happened after the Fourth Crusade in the year 1204. Italian merchants imported thousands of Armenians, Circassian, and Gregorian slaves to Italy. Most of the slaves were women who worked as household servants, but many worked processing sugar, a crop that was later cultivated in the Caribbean. Back to the present day of the triangular trade, slaves could work up to 48 hours on sugar plantations trying to process the sugar, because once the cane was cut open, the sap could sour within a day. Sometimes slaves got their arms and hands caught in rollers that were used for the sugar cane, and their overseers kept hatchets on hand in case they had to amputate the slaves. The life expectancy for a Brazilian slave on a sugar plantation was 23 years old due to the poor conditions which they suffered through. Things were a bit better in British-controlled Barbados and the United States. Working conditions were better, that more slaves were born than died, which is also bad, because that meant that slave owners were keeping their slaves healthy enough for them to reproduce, but then the slave owners would take their children and either sell them or put them to work on their own plantations. Starting in 1807, the different regions of the triangular trade started the different regions started abolishing the slave trade. Note that this does not mean that they got rid of slavery. they just stopped importing the slaves.